The apartment she lived in, the car she drove, and the career she thought she built herself. I sat there watching my daughter introduce me to her fiancé's family, as if I were a burden she had to explain away. Some silences cut deeper than any words could. There's the silence of exhaustion, the silence of meditation, and then there's the silence I chose that evening, the kind that swallows a roar so loud it could shake foundation. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I'm 62 years old. I spent 35 years building something from nothing, but my daughter Michelle never knew the full extent of it. That was by design. I wanted her to believe she could stand on her own 2 feet, make her own way, carve out her own success. I see now that my silence created something I never intended. The evening started ordinarily enough. Michelle had invited me to dinner at the Belmore, one of those restaurants where the waiters wear suits nicer than what most people wear to weddings. She was celebrating her engagement to Preston Whitmore III, and his parents were flying in from Connecticut to meet the family. By the family, she apparently meant just me. Her mother passed away when Michelle was 12, and it's been the 2 of us ever since. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my good blazer, the one Michelle bought me 3 Christmases ago. The hostess led me to a private dining room, where Michelle was already seated with Preston and 2 older people I assumed were his parents. Preston stood as I approached. He had that Kennedy-esque quality about him, all perfect teeth and prep school confidence. "Mr. Brennan, so glad you could make it," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but brief, the handshake of someone who's been taught proper etiquette but doesn't particularly care about the people he's greeting. "Thomas, please," I said. Michelle stood and kissed my cheek. "Dad, this is Preston's mother, Victoria, and his father, Preston Jr." Victoria extended 2 fingers rather than a full hand. "Charming to meet you," she said, though her eyes had already inventoried my outfit and found it wanting. Preston Jr. gave me a nod that could barely be called acknowledgement. Saturday. The conversation flowed around me like I was a stone in a stream. They discussed the wedding venue. Apparently Preston's family had a compound in the Hamptons. They debated between June and September. They talked about which yacht club would be most appropriate for the rehearsal dinner. "Of course, we'll handle all the arrangements," Victoria said, patting Michelle's hand. "I know these things can be financially overwhelming for some families." Michelle's cheeks flushed slightly. "That's very generous." "Your father," Victoria continued, turning to me with what I suppose she thought was a kind smile. "Michelle mentioned you work in retail?" I felt Michelle tense beside me. "Dad manages a store," she said quickly. "He's done very well for himself." "How lovely," Victoria said in a tone that made clear she thought it anything but. Honest work is so important. "Preston's family has been in investment banking for 4 generations, but we certainly respect all professions." Preston Jr. leaned back in his chair. "Thomas, perhaps after Michelle and Preston are married, we could help you with financial planning. Never too late to start thinking about retirement security." I took a sip of water. "That's kind of you." Michelle jumped in. "Actually, Dad's thinking about retiring soon. Aren't you, Dad?" I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had the bright-eyed girl who used to wait for me at the door after work become this woman so eager to minimize me? "We'll see," I said quietly. The dinner progressed through 7 courses. With each one, I felt myself becoming smaller in my daughter's narrative. She told them about her job as a senior consultant at Meridian Group, about her apartment in the city, about the car she'd worked so hard to afford. "I've really had to make my own way," she said, reaching for Preston's hand. "Dad did his best, but I knew from an early age that if I wanted more than a simple life, I'd have to create it myself." There it was, not malicious perhaps, but dismissive. The life I'd given her was simple. The sacrifices I'd made were just someone doing his best, but falling short. Preston Sr. raised his glass. "That's the kind of drive we admire, Michelle. You've clearly risen above your circumstances." I set down my fork. The sound was quieter than my heartbeat, but somehow Michelle heard it. Her eyes met mine for just a second before darting away. The evening concluded with brandy and cigars for the men Preston Jr. insisted, and I found myself on the restaurant's terrace with my future son-in-law and his father. The city sprawled below us, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Each person, the hero of their own story, the victim of someone else's. "Michelle's quite remarkable," Preston said, puffing his cigar. "Completely self-made. That's rarer than you'd think in our circles." "Admirable, really," Preston Jr. added, considering she didn't have the advantages our children typically have, but she's clearly resourceful. I rolled the brandy in my glass, watching it catch the light. She is that. You must be very proud, Preston continued, seeing her overcome such obstacles. I thought about the tuition payments I'd made to Northwestern, the scholarship she thought she'd won that was actually funded by my anonymous donation, the apartment I'd co-signed for, the car lease I'd guaranteed, the connections I'd quietly made to ensure her resume landed on the right desks. I am proud, I said. Very proud. We said our goodbyes in the restaurant's lobby. Michelle hugged me, and for a moment she was 8 years old again, clinging to me after her mother's funeral, making me promise I'd never leave her too. Thanks for coming, Dad, she whispered. I know tonight was probably a lot. It was enlightening, I said. She pulled back, searching my face. You're not upset, are you, about what I said? I didn't mean anything bad. It's just that Preston's family, they have high standards. I understand perfectly, sweetheart. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Michelle. More than you know. I drove home in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, a car I drove by choice, not necessity, and sat in my modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. The house where I'd raised Michelle, where every room held memories of helping with homework, hosting birthday parties, teaching her to be kind, to be humble, to remember where she came from. Apparently, I'd failed at the last 3. I spent that night in my study, surrounded by papers and memories. On my desk was a photograph of Michelle at her college graduation, beaming with pride, unaware that the dean standing beside her in the photo was there because I'd endowed a chair in her mother's name. On the wall was her high school diploma from Rosewood Academy, where she'd attended on what she believed was a merit scholarship. The next morning I made a phone call. David, it's Thomas Brennan. Thomas! It's been too long. How can I help you? David Rothstein had been my attorney for 20 years. He'd helped me structure my holdings, create the trusts, establish the LLCs that kept my name out of public records. I need you to review some documents for me, I said. Let's start with the lease agreement on 1247 Riverside Drive, apartment 4C. There was a pause. That's Michelle's apartment. Yes. Thomas, what's going on? Just review the paperwork, David. I want to understand the exact terms. Over the next 3 days, I made similar calls. To my accountant, to my property manager, to the director of the foundation I'd established. Each conversation was brief and professional. I was simply gathering information, understanding the architecture of what I'd built. Michelle called me on Thursday, breathless with excitement. Dad, you won't believe it. Preston surprised me with tickets to Barcelona next month, his family's villa there. Isn't that amazing? Wonderful, sweetheart. I know it's expensive, but I've been working so hard, I deserve a break. Preston says his parents want to get to know me better, show me how their family vacations. I hope you have a great time. You're okay, right? You sounded weird at dinner the other night. I'm fine, Michelle. Just tired. Okay. Love you, Dad. Love you too. I hung up and returned to the spreadsheet on my computer screen. Numbers don't lie. They don't flatter or deceive. They simply exist, neutral and honest. The numbers showed exactly how much of my daughter's life I'd funded while she'd convinced herself she'd earned it all alone. The first tremor in Michelle's perfect world came on a Tuesday afternoon. She called me around 3 o'clock, her voice tight with stress. Dad, the weirdest thing just happened. My landlord called saying there's an issue with my lease. Something about the co-signer needing to re-verify information. Did you get a letter or something? I was in my garden, pruning roses. No letter here. What kind of information? I don't know, it was confusing. He mentioned something about financial guarantees and documentation. I told him I pay my rent on time every month, so I don't know what the problem is. I'm sure it'll work out, sweetheart. Yeah, probably just paperwork stuff. Oh, and there's this weird thing at work too. They're doing some kind of audit of client accounts. My boss seemed really stressed about it. Audits happen. I know, but the timing is strange. We just landed the Hartwell account. I told you about that, right? The huge manufacturing client? I basically brought them in single-handedly. You mentioned it. Anyway, I should go. Just wanted to check about the lease thing. Keep me posted, honey. 3 days later, she called again. This time, the panic was undisguised. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. My car lease company says they need to repossess the vehicle because of guarantor default. What does that even mean? I've never missed a payment. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the very document she was describing. Did they explain further? No, they just sent this legal letter saying the car needs to be returned within 48 hours. Dad, I need that car. How am I supposed to get to work? To meetings? Maybe there's been a mistake. Of course there's been a mistake. A huge one. I'm calling my lawyer. That seems wise. Could you maybe call them? As the co-signer? Maybe if they hear from you directly. Michelle, I think this might be beyond a simple phone call. What does that mean? It means sometimes these situations are more complicated than they appear. You're being really weird, Dad. Is something going on? I'm just saying that perhaps it's time to understand exactly how things work. How things work? I work hard for everything I have. I always have. I said nothing. Silence, I'd learned, reveals more than words. Dad, I'm here. Will you help me or not? I'll always help you, Michelle. But maybe not in the way you expect. She hung up on me. It was the first time she'd ever done that. The weekend came. Michelle didn't call. On Monday morning she did. My apartment. Her voice was hollow. They're evicting me. On what grounds? The lease was apparently in someone else's name. Some LLC I've never heard of. Brennan Holdings? And now they want to terminate the lease with 30 days' notice because of material changes in guarantor status. Brennan Holdings, I repeated. Do you know anything about this? That's your last name. It is. Dad, what's going on? What's going on is that reality is catching up with perception, Michelle. What are you talking about? Are you saying, did you have something to do with this? I stood and walked to my window. Outside, my neighbor was teaching his daughter to ride a bike, running alongside her, ready to catch her when she fell. Michelle, who do you think paid your tuition at Rosewood? The Merit Scholarship. There was no Merit Scholarship. I created an endowment. The school called it a scholarship to protect your pride. Silence. Who do you think paid for Northwestern? I had the founder's grant, which was funded entirely by an anonymous donor. Me. No. Your apartment? I own the building. Through Brennan Holdings. You're lying. Your car? I guaranteed the lease. When I removed my guarantee, they had no choice but to repossess. Stop. Your job at Meridian? I'm a major investor in the firm. I made sure your resume crossed the right desks. Stop it. Even the Hartwell account you brought in? Robert Hartwell and I go back 30 years. He's been buying from my company for decades. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Your company? You manage a store. I own the store, Michelle. And 12 others, along with 3 distribution centers and a wholesale operation that supplies retailers across the eastern seaboard. I employ over 400 people. No, I built it from nothing. I started with a single shop when you were 2 years old, worked 16-hour days, turned small profits into investments, investments into expansion. I did it so you'd never worry about money, never feel the fear I felt as a child. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to believe you could succeed on your own. I wanted you to have confidence. I wanted you to be proud of yourself. You wanted. Do you know what it's been like? Thinking I had to prove myself every single day? Feeling like I was constantly climbing uphill while everyone around me had it easy? You never had to prove anything to me, Michelle. But I had to prove it to myself? And now you're telling me it was all fake? That every achievement I'm proud of was actually just you pulling strings behind my back? The achievements were real. Your intelligence is real. Your work ethic is real. I just made sure the doors were open when you were ready to walk through them. And the dinner? Her voice was cold now. Preston's family? You sat there and let them condescend to you. Let them offer you financial advice like you were some charity case. Yes. Why? I wanted to see what you'd do, how you'd handle it. And I failed your test? Is that what this is? Some cruel experiment? This isn't about tests, Michelle. It's about truth. You told Preston's family you had to overcome obstacles, rise above your circumstances. What circumstances? You've never wanted for anything. I wanted respect. I wanted to earn things myself. You could have. At any point you could have asked. I would have been honest with you. You hid everything from me. And you hid your shame of me from yourself, I said quietly. The line went silent. When Preston's father offered to help me with retirement planning, you didn't correct him. When his mother talked about honest work like it was something quaint and sad, you didn't defend me. You agreed with their assessment that you'd risen above the simple life I'd given you. I didn't. You did, sweetheart. And I don't entirely blame you. I created the circumstances that allowed you to believe I was less than I am. But you chose to embrace that belief because it made your story better. The self-made woman who succeeded despite her humble beginnings. So what now? She was crying. You take everything away? Teach me a lesson? I'm not taking anything away, Michelle. I'm simply removing my support from someone who doesn't value it. Your job is yours. They'd be fools to let you go, regardless of my investment. Your apartment, you have 30 days to find something you can actually afford on your salary. Your car will be repossessed, but that's what public transportation is for. This is insane. You're punishing me for one dinner. I'm not punishing you. I'm letting you experience the reality you claim to have already conquered. Preston will, his family will. Will what? Still want him to marry you? Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, you'll know if he's marrying you, or the image he has of you. I hate you. No, you don't. But you're angry, and that's okay. Don't tell me how I feel. Michelle, I love you more than anything in this world. That's why this is so hard. I raised you to be kind, to be humble, to remember that success is as much about luck and privilege as it is about merit. And somehow, despite my best efforts, you became someone who looks down on the very person who gave you everything. You did. And it breaks my heart. But it would break my heart more to keep enabling you to become someone your mother wouldn't recognize. I heard her breathing, ragged and uneven. Your mother, I continued, came from money. Real money. Old Connecticut money. Like Preston's family. But she chose to marry a guy working in a stockroom, living in a studio apartment, because she said wealth without character is just expensive emptiness. She taught me that. I thought I was teaching you. Don't bring Mom into this. She's always been in this, Michelle. Every decision I made asking myself what she would want for you. She'd want you to support me, to be proud of me. I am proud of you. God, Michelle, I'm so proud of you. But being proud and enabling delusion are different things. Another long silence. So what do I do now? She asked, her voice small. You figure it out, like you always told everyone you did. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You're smart, you're capable, and despite everything, you're strong. You've just never had to actually prove it before. I can't, Preston's family. They'll do whatever they do. And you'll handle it. Will you? She stopped. Started again. If I need help, I'm your father, Michelle. I'll always be here. But I won't be your invisible safety net anymore. If you need help, you'll have to ask for it, honestly. Without pretense. I don't know if I can do that. Then you'll learn. One of the most important lessons in life is learning to ask for help without shame. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, did you plan this? Taking everything away? I didn't take anything, sweetheart. I just stopped giving without acknowledgement. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. I know. We sat in silence, connected by technology and biology, and a lifetime of love that had somehow gotten tangled up in pride and misunderstanding. I should go, she finally said. Okay. Dad? Yes? I'm sorry. For the dinner. For what I said. For all of it. I know you are. Will we be okay? Eventually. But it's going to take time. And honesty. Real honesty. Not the kind where we pretend things didn't happen. Okay. I love you, Michelle. I love you too, Dad. She hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time looking at the photograph of her graduation. She looked so happy in that picture. So confident. I'd given her that confidence. But I'd also given her a false foundation to build it on. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe the mistake was thinking I could give her anything at all. Maybe the only things worth having are the things we take for ourselves, with full knowledge of their cost. The next few weeks were quiet. Michelle moved to a smaller apartment in a less trendy neighborhood. She sold jewelry and designer clothes to make ends meet. Preston, to his credit, didn't immediately break off the engagement, but I heard through a mutual acquaintance that his parents had concerns about the changed financial situation. I waited. I gardened. I worked. I thought a lot about my late wife, about the promises I'd made at her grave to do right by our daughter. 6 weeks after our phone conversation, Michelle showed up at my house on a Saturday morning. She looked tired, thinner. She was wearing jeans and a sweater I'd seen 100 times, the casual clothes she used to wear before she'd decided her wardrobe needed to reflect her success. "Can I come in?" she asked. Of course. I made coffee. We sat in the kitchen where I'd taught her to make pancakes, where we'd done homework together, where we'd talked about everything and nothing. "Preston and I broke up," she said. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" "If you're hurting, yes. If you're relieved, no." She almost smiled. His parents were not supportive of the changes. And Preston, he said he loved me, but I think he loved the version of me that came with a certain lifestyle. Better to know now. "Yeah." She stared into her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot. About what you said. About Mom." I waited. I don't remember a lot about her. I was so young. But I remember there's this one memory. We were at some fancy restaurant. Someone's wedding, maybe? And the waiter spilled wine on her dress. This expensive dress. And she just laughed. She helped him clean it up, told him it was okay, gave him a big tip anyway. Your mother was grace personified. I wouldn't have done that. The old me, I mean. The me from 2 months ago. I would have been mortified. I would have made it about me. You were young. I was a snob. Dad, I was a snob. You were trying to fit into a world you thought you needed to conquer. A world you'd already conquered. You just let me believe it was still out of reach. She looked up at me. Why? Because watching you struggle to prove yourself was still better than watching you take everything for granted. At least, that's what I thought. Now, I'm not so sure I made the right choice. You didn't, I know. But I didn't either. You gave me everything, and I pretended I'd earned it all. That's worse, isn't it? It's not about worse or better, Michelle. It's about learning who we really are when the scaffolding is removed. I'm not sure I like who I am without it. Then change. You're 28. You have your whole life to become someone you respect. She nodded slowly. My job, they're keeping me on. Turns out I actually am good at what I do. But they're moving me to a different team, one that's not connected to clients, you know. That's good. I found a roommate. For the new apartment. She's a teacher. She's nice. Normal. We split a bottle of wine last night and talked about reality TV and student loans. It was the most real conversation I've had in years. I'm glad. Dad, I want to understand. About the company. About what you built. Not because I want anything from it, but because I want to know who you really are. Not the version I created in my head to make myself feel better. I stood and walked to my study. Michelle followed. I showed her the ledgers, the business plans, the photographs of the first store, the documents of expansion. I told her about the 60-hour weeks, the risks, the failures, the slow accumulation of success. Why retail? She asked. Because it's honest. You sell a product, someone needs it, money exchanges hands. It's direct, real. Your mother liked that about it. She said in her family, money came from money, removed from actual labor by so many generations that it felt meaningless. She wanted something we built together. Did you build it together? Until she got sick. Then I built it for her. For you. Michelle traced her finger along the edge of my desk. I wish I'd known her better. Me too, sweetheart. Would she be disappointed in me? I thought about my wife, about her kindness and her clarity. She'd be disappointed in some of your choices. But she'd love who you're becoming. How do you know? I don't even know who I'm becoming. That's how I know. The fact that you're asking, that you're questioning, that you're trying, that's exactly who she'd want you to be. We talked for hours that day. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. She asked questions about the business, about my decisions, about what I'd done with the money over the years. I told her about the charitable foundation her mother and I had established, about the scholarships that were given in her mother's name, real scholarships, not fronts for parental funding. Why didn't you tell me about any of this? She asked as the sun was setting. Pride, maybe. Stupid pride. I thought if you knew I had money, you'd either take advantage or feel obligated. I wanted you to make your own choices. Instead, I made choices based on lies, based on incomplete information. That's on me. No, it's on both of us. You hid things, and I didn't ask questions. I was happy to believe I'd done it all myself because it made me feel special. You are special, Michelle, with or without any of this. I don't feel special. I feel humbled and grateful and ashamed. Shame is useful only if it leads to change. Okay, Confucius, she said, but she was smiling. It was good to see her smile. As she was leaving, she turned back at the door. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. If I wanted to learn about the business, really learn, not to take it over or anything, but just to understand it, would you teach me? I'd be honored. Even after everything? Especially after everything. She hugged me then, really hugged me, the way she used to when she was small and the world was simple. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took losing everything to remember why. You didn't lose everything, sweetheart. You still have yourself. That's the one thing I could never give you and never take away. In the months that followed, Michelle came over every Sunday. We'd go over the business together, and I'd teach her how I'd built it, how I'd maintained it, how I'd grown it. She asked smart questions. She challenged my assumptions. She brought fresh perspectives. She never moved back to her old lifestyle. She kept the roommate, kept the modest apartment, kept the Metro card instead of the leased BMW. She told me once that she'd been afraid at first, afraid of what people would think, afraid of being judged. And then I realized, she said, that the people who judged me for having less weren't people I wanted in my life anyway. Preston called her once, 6 months later. He'd heard she was doing well at work, heard rumors she was connected to the Brennan retail empire. He suggested coffee. She declined. Did you tell him the truth? I asked when she told me about it. No. I told him I wasn't interested in revisiting the past. Good answer. Besides, she said with a wry smile, he was never interested in the real me anyway. Just the trophy version he could show his parents. His loss. Definitely his loss. I look back on that dinner at the Belmore sometimes. At the moment when everything shifted, I think about the different ways it could have gone. I could have stood up, declared my success, put Preston's parents in their place. I could have pulled Michelle aside, told her she was breaking my heart. I could have done 100 different things. But silence, I've learned, has its own power. It creates space for people to reveal themselves, for consequences to unfold naturally, for reality to emerge from beneath layers of pretense. My daughter called me a simple man with a simple life. She wasn't entirely wrong. My life is simpler than she knew. I wake up, I work, I tend my garden, I remember my wife, I love my daughter. The money, the business, the success, those are just details. The real story is about a man who tried to give his daughter roots and wings and accidentally gave her borrowed feathers instead. It's about a daughter who thought she was flying on her own, only to discover she'd been carried all along. But here's the thing about that discovery. It didn't destroy her. It transformed her. Now, when we have dinner usually at my house, where I cook and she brings wine, we talk honestly. About struggles and successes. About fears and hopes. About the complicated business of being human in a world that constantly asks us to be more, do more, have more. She started seeing someone new. A teacher, coincidentally her roommate's brother. He doesn't care about wealth or status. He cares that Michelle laughs at his terrible jokes and volunteers at the literacy center on Saturdays. Would Mom have liked him? She asked me last week. Your mother would have loved anyone who made you happy, I said. But yes, I think she would have liked him very much. Good. She paused. Dad, I've been thinking about the business, about succession planning. Michelle, not now, not for a long time, but eventually. I'd like to learn enough that when the time comes I could step in. Not because I'm entitled to it, but because I'd be qualified for it. We have time to work on that. But you'll teach me? Really teach me? Not just let me shadow you? I'll teach you everything I know. Even the hard stuff? The failures and mistakes? Especially those. They're more valuable than the successes. She smiled. Mom would say something like that. Your mother was wise beyond her years. So are you, old man. Flattery will get you everywhere. We clinked our glasses together, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope that my daughter would inherit my business or carry on my legacy, those things didn't matter. Hope that she'd inherited something more important, the ability to grow, to change, to become more than she was. The car she drove, the apartment she lived in, and the career she thought she built herself. They were all gone now, replaced with something smaller but infinitely more valuable: truth. And in the end, truth is the only inheritance worth giving.